Well, hello again. I can't compete in any way, shape or form with the amazing images that we've seen so far this evening, because I guess my medium in this context is the written word. And because it's the written word, as opposed to like the spoken word, I hope you'll bear with me if I use my notes. So this evening I'd like to talk about the role of metaphor in science. Now you may ask what role metaphors could possibly play in chemistry, physics or cosmology, say. However, a new generation of research suggests that metaphors are much more pervasive than linguists first thought, and that they deeply infuse our fundamental conceptual models, the models that are at the core of our various and respective fields of academic inquiry. Now, my background is that of a scientist with an interest in philosophy of science and how a transdisciplinary approach can pay dividends. And as I mentioned before, our group Project Dialogue recently published Art, Science and Cultural Understanding that we touched on. So how does our imagination, through thought and language, allow us to construct the vital conceptual models that underpin all research across the arts, sciences and humanities? Since time is so short this evening, I'll jump straight in and talk about Lakoff and Johnson's influential Philosophy in the Flesh, published in 1999. Now, to me, what makes Philosophy in the Flesh so refreshing and interesting is that they've taken a long, hard look at the objective-subject divide and Descartes' mind-body dualism. And in effect, they've rejected both in favour of what they termed embodied scientific realism, which recognises that our cognitive processes are strongly influenced by our sensory motor faculties and experiences as humans in a human-shaped body and with human senses in a physical world. Now, I think it's quite a groundbreaking approach that acknowledges the tightly focused logic of the Anglo-American school of analytic philosophy typified by Frege and Russell, but also recognises the subtle roles that's played by ambiguity and plasticity of language, as emphasised in the continental school of philosophy, epitomised by Derrida and Lyotard, for example. And as Stephen Mithen emphasises in his book, Prehistory of the Mind, conceptual plasticity is an essential part of the mental toolkit modern humans have evolved that probably differentiates us from early humans. Lakoff and Johnson have opened up a very interesting route for explaining how we humans have been able to bring about some quite astounding feats of creativity and imagination, from interplanetary flight to the fractured visual perspectives of Picasso. Well, our speech, if we start to listen to it carefully, contains numerous clues as to how our embodied senses form the core of how we frequently express ideas. For example, I see what you're saying. I'm having difficulty grasping that concept. He's only scratching the surface. My gut feeling is that these results are wrong, etc. Such phrases, and there appear to be hundreds of them in all languages studied, lead on naturally to a study of the underlying structure of metaphors. Up to the middle of the last century, the general feeling about metaphors seemed to be that they were simply a decorative feature of the vernacular in which a word or phrase was applied to something to which it did not directly belong, simply for the purpose of colour or emphasis. More recently, artists such as Barbara Maria Stafford, geneticist Evelyn Fox Kelly, and writers Arvid and Hess have emphasised that linguistic metaphors aren't just passive forms of description, but play an active function that strongly influence our fundamental conceptualization at a pre-reflective level across the arts sciences in general. Like Lyckoff-Johnson's new theory of cross-domain mapping was built on Black's earlier pioneering work, saying in effect that the essence of metaphor is understanding and experiencing one kind of thing in terms of another. Cognitive scientists now generally accept that the word or phrase previously recognized as a metaphor is really just the surface manifestation of this underlying cross-domain conceptualization, the tip of the metaphoric iceberg, as it were. Even the simplest metaphoric expressions display the one essential character that all metaphors share. They cannot be literally true. For example, King Richard is a lion in battle. Richard is a human. Or Shakespeare's comparison of Juliet to the sun. Metaphors are always literally false, but yet true in some different non-literal sense that benefits our understanding by offering a new standpoint from which to view the world, often producing unexpected insight. As Gary Hagberg notes, metaphoric expressions propose a way of seeing the world, a distinct perspective upon it, rather than making a true or false assertion. In effect, I see metaphors as offering a technique for travelling beyond the logical event horizon of literal deductive truth, which allows our imagination to wander freely amongst different domains and to make new and productive connections. And this holds true in science as much as it does in the arts or humanities. The figurative language of metaphors and analogies helps scientists, and everyone else, to link experience, intuition and imagination when erecting conceptual scaffolding for moving into new and unknown realms, where literal language on its own may be insufficient to fuel and sustain imagination. Metaphors, by their very nature, are open-ended rather than prescriptive, and this polyvocality allows provisional conceptual models to explore intersecting notions of truth for the purpose of making testable predictions. An apt metaphor can suggest innovative directions for experiments that in turn lead to further elaboration of the metaphor until it is eventually accepted as the core of a predictive theoretical model. There are numerous historical examples of visual metaphors forming the basis of predictive models in the physical sciences. Bernoulli's billiard ball model of gases, the planetary motion of the atom, the stick and ball molecular model, and the deformable fabric of relativistic space-time, for example. My view is that scientific theories function essentially as virtual metaphoric equations, linking our internal mental schema of conceptual models and the external physical world of literal truth and experimental results. The nature of the test is different on each side of the equation. Metaphoric truth, such as unexpected insight, on the conceptual side, literal truth on the physical side. A brilliant theory functions well in both domains, and in doing so, ushers in a new paradigm to its novel insight and new way of seeing. Every new paradigm will be based around a new core metaphor, and so all Kuhn's scientific revolutions are therefore essentially metaphoric revolutions. Logical consistency and deductive rigour are tools by which conceptual models are judged, not tools for creating them. One realm in which the use of metaphors is quite striking is how we conceptualize time. Very little of our understanding of time is purely temporal. Instead, it leans heavily on what we observe and infer in terms of motion and change. Time seems to be generally imagined and experienced as the passage of regular, measured intervals, the movement of clock hands or a repeated series of similar events, for example. Time may be primitive in physics, but cognitively the situation is reversed, and motion appears to us as primary, and time is conceptualized in terms of motion. The visual system of our brain has an area has an area dedicated to detection of motion, but no corresponding area has yet been found for detection of global time, suggesting that motion is very likely to be the source domain for our temporal metaphors. So how is the passage of time conventionally represented? This usually happens in two closely related but subtly different ways: the moving events metaphor and the moving observer metaphor, as we see from the graphics. In this, the moving events slide, we see that the moving events metaphor, or in the moving events metaphor, a stationary observer faces in a fixed direction, the future. An indefinitely long sequence of objects moves towards and past the observer from front to back, representing the temporal passage of objects and events from the future into the past. Such a metaphoric schema is able to represent our daily life, the passage of events or an ordered sequence of objects one after another. For example, the time for action has arrived. The deadline has long passed. Your birthday is approaching. The parcel came before midday. The second major metaphor for time is the moving observer. In this schema, the observer is now moving, and each fixed location in the observer's path is a time or event. The observer's moving location is always the present. The path ahead is the future, and that behind is the past. Again, time can be measured and events experienced in order. For example, we passed the deadline. This will cause problems down the road. We're coming up to the funny part of the talk. Both moving time and moving observer metaphors occur in many different cultures with only minor variations, whether advanced industrial nations or agrarian societies. As individuals, we seem happy to use either metaphor without any overall pattern as yet emerging. In the spirit of these laser events, let's have some audience participation, and I want to undertake an experiment. This is the first time I've tried the experiment, so there's a lot riding on it. Okay? So please look at the screen and read the text silently to yourself. Then decide which of the two possibilities, A or B, follow from it. After a few seconds, I'll ask for a show of hands. There's no right or wrong answer in this example, so please stick with your initial choice and don't be influenced by others. I'll just wait a few seconds. Okay, how many chose option A? How many chose option B? Okay, about 3-1, A to B. I'm glad about that. We've never done this experiment before. Well, in fact, the message is intrinsically ambiguous. And we cannot take either of the two possibilities as being uniquely correct. We're often told to avoid mixing metaphors, and with good cause, as we've just discovered experimentally. So what happened here to cause the ambiguity? The confusion arises because we're not given any clue as to which metaphor the writer has adopted. And certainly the entailments between the two different metaphors can lead you to directly opposite conclusions. If you're using the moving events metaphor, then the term ahead refers to advancement of position closer towards the stationary observer, i.e. the meeting will occur earlier in calendar time, so choice B. If the moving observer metaphor is being employed, then the term ahead refers to advancement in distance away from the observer, meaning later in calendar time, so choice A. So thank you for your participation, and I'm very pleased that we got such diversity between the two results. Thank you.